The sun drapes the neighborhood in gold as I pull into my driveway, the low rumble of my Dodge Charger fading into silence. Crestwood Estates, a pristine, HOA-controlled suburb where every lawn is manicured to perfection, every house boasts neutral tones, and every neighbor waves just enough to seem polite but never long enough to start a real conversation. I step out of my car, stretching my shoulders. After a 10-hour shift patrolling the city, home should feel like a sanctuary. But something about Crestwood has always felt off. Maybe it's the way my wife, Tasha, and I get second glances at the community pool. Maybe it's the way our white neighbors hesitate before responding to a friendly, good morning. Or maybe it's the woman standing at the edge of my property right now, arms crossed, lips pursed, so tight they could cut glass. I recognize her instantly. Meredith Harper, self-appointed queen of the HOA. The kind of woman who monitors lawn heights like a federal investigation and believes her laminated rulebook is the gospel. She's complained before about the non-traditional color of our garden pots, the time our recycling bin was out a few hours too long. Small things. Annoying, but nothing worth losing sleep over. I sigh, already exhausted. Evening, Meredith. She doesn't respond right away. Just stares at my car, then my house, then at me. Her blue eyes flickering with something I've seen before, disapproval wrapped in polite concern. I noticed, she finally says, her voice honey but sharp, that you've been parking that vehicle in the driveway instead of the garage. I arch a brow.
Yeah.
Garage is full. Storage boxes. Why? Meredith's expression tightens, and she steps closer, lowering her voice as if she's sharing a national secret. It's just that the HOA guidelines strongly encourage garage parking. You know, to maintain the aesthetic integrity of the community. Aesthetic integrity. I almost laugh. My car is clean, well-maintained. But I know what she's really saying. It's not the car, it's the man who owns it. I'll keep that in mind, I say, deliberately neutral. Her smile is tight. Wonderful. And, oh, one more thing. She gestures toward the curb. There was a visitor at your house earlier? A young man in a hoodie. She pauses meaningfully. Looked out of place. I was going to call security, but he left before I could. My jaw clenches. That young man in a hoodie was my nephew, Elijah. 17, honor roll student, visiting to borrow a book for his history paper. But I know how Meredith saw him. A threat. I force a smile. That was my nephew. But I appreciate your vigilance. She beams, as if expecting a thank you for watching my own home. We all just want to keep our neighborhood safe. With that, she strolls away, satisfied. I exhale, watching her disappear down the sidewalk. It's just a parking complaint. Just another microaggression. Nothing new. But something in my gut tells me this won't be the last time Meredith Harper has something to say about my presence in her neighborhood. And I'm right. Because the next time she calls the police, she has no idea she's calling me. The first sign that something's wrong comes 2 days later. I'm backing out of my driveway, coffee in one hand, radio crackling on my dash, when I notice a small, white slip tucked under my windshield wiper. My first thought? A ticket. But that makes no sense. I'm on my own property. I step out, grab the paper, and unfold it. Notice of violation. Crestwood Estates Homeowners Association. My lips press into a thin line. I skim the notice, my irritation growing with every line. Infraction, improper vehicle storage. Resolution, relocate vehicle to the garage within 48 hours to avoid fines. I exhale through my nose. This woman is unbelievable. It's not just a suggestion this time. It's a demand, a warning. And I have no doubt who's behind it. I fold the paper neatly and slide it into my pocket. It's not worth getting worked up over, not yet. I have a shift to get to. But as I drive down the block, something catches my eye. Meredith Harper, standing at the end of her driveway, watching me. She doesn't wave, doesn't smile, just stands there, arms crossed, eyes tracking my every move like a warden monitoring a prison yard. A slow, uneasy chill settles in my chest. By the time I get home that evening, the unease has only deepened. Tasha meets me at the door, her expression tight. Babe, did you see the email from the HOA? I shake my head, shrugging off my jacket. Got a violation notice this morning. Let me guess, same thing? Worse, she says, handing me her phone. I glance at the screen. It's a community-wide email. Subject: Important notice, Neighborhood Standards Enforcement. Dear residents, we've noticed an increase in violations regarding vehicle storage and general home presentation. As a reminder, the HOA guidelines exist to maintain the integrity and safety of our community. Please be mindful of how our neighborhood appears to visitors. We appreciate your cooperation. Meredith Harper, HOA President. I stare at the word safety, a little too long. Tasha folds her arms. You know this is about us, right? I sigh, rubbing my temple. Yeah, I know. She scoffs. She's trying to make it sound like we're the problem. Meanwhile, the Bakers have 3 rusted-out trucks sitting in their driveway, and nobody says a damn thing. She's right. We both know it. But confronting Meredith directly won't do anything. Not yet. Still, something about this feels different. More calculated. More personal. I glance out the window, eyes scanning the quiet, perfect street. The houses are identical. The driveways are clean. The lawns are flawless. And somewhere behind one of those picture-perfect windows, Meredith Harper is watching, planning her next move. I don't know what she's up to yet. But I do know one thing. She's not going to stop. By the end of the week, it's clear Meredith isn't just nitpicking. She's waging a quiet war. The violation notices keep coming. First, it's the car. Then it's our non-uniform flower pots. Then a complaint about unapproved gatherings after my nephew Elijah and his friends visit for a game night. And then the real insult. A letter in our mailbox. Formal HOA review notification. Due to multiple infractions, the Crestwood Estates Homeowners Association will be reviewing your compliance status. A hearing will be scheduled to determine appropriate corrective measures. I stare at the letter, my fingers tightening around the edges. A hearing? I scoff. For what? Existing? Tasha reads over my shoulder, shaking her head. She's trying to build a case, babe. Trying to make it look like we don't belong here. I already know she's right. But I also know one thing Meredith doesn't. I don't just enforce the law. I know how to use it. The next afternoon, I see Meredith doing her usual rounds, clipboard in hand, scrutinizing every detail of the neighborhood as if she's running an elite military base. I don't wait for her to come to me. I go to her. She's marking something down when my shadow falls over her. We need to talk. She glances up, feigning surprise. Oh, Officer Williams. Her lips curl at the title, like it tastes bitter in her mouth. How can I help you? I hold up the latest violation notice. You want to explain this? She blinks, tilting her head. It's all in the guidelines, dear. Just ensuring everyone follows the same standards. I take a step closer. Funny, because I've been looking at those guidelines. Nowhere does it say my car has to be in the garage. Nowhere does it prohibit my planters, and unless you've suddenly banned visitors, my nephew and his friends aren't an issue. Her smile tightens. I assure you, these decisions aren't personal. I cut her off. They feel personal. A flicker of something flashes in her eyes. A challenge. A test to see how far she can push me. She exhales dramatically. Look, I understand that, given your background, you might not be familiar with how HOAs work. I go still. Given my background. She means black. I let the silence stretch just long enough for discomfort to creep in. Then I smile. Actually, I'm very familiar. See, I did some checking of my own. I pull out my phone and tap the screen, opening a file. Turns out, you've been a little selective in your enforcement. I show her the photos, ones I took last night while on a walk. The Bakers' rusted-out trucks. The Simmons basketball hoop, clearly violating the no permanent recreational structures rule. The Johnsons' lawn gnomes, clashing with the so-called uniform aesthetic. Interesting, I say. None of them have hearings scheduled. Meredith's face twitches, but she recovers quickly. I can assure you, all violations are being handled appropriately. I pocket my phone. We'll see about that. She scoffs. If you feel there's an issue, you're welcome to bring it up at the review hearing. There it is. Her power play. She's betting on the system, on the HOA, on the predominantly white board, on her reputation, to back her up. I nod slowly. Oh, I'll be there. That night, I reach out to my neighbor, Darnell. He and his wife, Lisa, have lived here longer than we have, long enough to know how things really work. When I tell him what's happening, he shakes his head. Man, she's been like this for years. You're not the first, but you are the first she's actually trying to push out. That settles it. I tell him my plan. By the end of our conversation, I have allies. Darnell, Lisa, a few other homeowners tired of Meredith's power trips, and one last ace up my sleeve. Because what Meredith doesn't know, I've got something she can't argue with. Cold, hard proof. The HOA review meeting is held in the Crestwood Estates clubhouse, a pristine, over-decorated space with polished oak tables and an air of manufactured exclusivity. A dozen people are already seated when I arrive, most of them older, white, and nodding politely as Meredith Harper commands the room like a queen addressing her court. Tasha squeezes my hand as we walk in. Darnell and Lisa are already there, along with a few other neighbors who've quietly voiced their support. Still, the room has the weight of something rigged, and Meredith knows it. She flashes a tight smile as I take my seat. Officer Williams, thank you for coming. I lean back in my chair. Wouldn't miss it. Meredith clears her throat and addresses the board. As you're all aware, this meeting was called due to repeated violations of community guidelines. She turns to me, flipping through her neatly prepared file. Unfortunately, despite multiple notices and warnings, Mr. Williams has failed to comply with HOA regulations. We're here to determine the appropriate corrective actions. She places her hands on the table, a gesture of mock sympathy. Now, before we begin, I just want to say, this isn't personal. We hold everyone to the same standard. I almost laugh. She's so confident. So sure she has me cornered. I rest my hands on the table. Is that so? Meredith nods. Of course. I nod back. Great. Because I did some homework. I reach into my bag, pull out a folder, and place it on the table. Meredith's confidence flickers, just for a second. I open the folder, laying out a series of photos. The Baker's rusted-out trucks. The Simmons basketball hoop. The Johnsons' lawn gnomes. Every single violation that's been ignored. The board members shift uncomfortably. Now, I continue, keeping my tone calm. I found these while reviewing the HOA regulations. I slide a printed document across the table. Nowhere does it say that a homeowner is required to park in their garage. Nowhere does it prohibit flower pots of different colors. And nowhere does it say a black teenager visiting his uncle is a violation of neighborhood safety. Meredith's smile twitches. Well, I raise a hand. I'm not done. I reach into my bag again and pull out my trump card. A recording. I hit play. Meredith's voice fills the room, crisp and clear. Given your background, you might not be familiar with how HOAs work. Silence. Then murmurs. Someone shifts in their seat. Another clears their throat. Meredith's face goes pale. That's taken out of context. I lean forward. Oh, feel free to clarify. She sputters, looking to the board for support. But the weight in the room has shifted. The tightrope she's been walking? It's fraying beneath her feet. I lean back, letting the silence do the work. Then, Darnell speaks up. This isn't about rules. It's about control. And we're done letting you pick and choose who gets to feel welcome in our neighborhood. The board members exchange glances. Meredith's power is slipping through her fingers. And she knows it. For the first time, she's the one with something to lose. For the first time since this meeting started, Meredith Harper has no words. The silence in the room is thick, charged with something dangerous. People are shifting in their seats, exchanging glances. Some of them look uncomfortable. Others, like Darnell and Lisa, look downright satisfied. I keep my expression neutral. But inside, I can feel the shift. The power she thought she had? It's slipping. Still, Meredith isn't the type to go down easy. She smooths her blouse, forces a smile, and turns to the board, her voice sweet as ever. Now, I think we can all agree that this is being blown out of proportion. She lets out a rehearsed, breathy laugh. I mean, honestly, recording private conversations? It feels a bit inappropriate, don't you think? I meet her gaze evenly. Not as inappropriate as singling out black homeowners while letting everyone else break the same rules. The murmurs grow louder. One of the board members, an older man named Richard, clears his throat. Meredith, is this true? Have you been selectively enforcing violations? Meredith's jaw clenches. Of course not. I treat all residents equally. I lean forward. Then explain this. I pull out my next trump card. A folder of emails. Copies of every complaint Meredith has ever filed. And wouldn't you know it? 90% of them are against black or non-white homeowners. Gasps ripple through the room. Lisa, sitting beside Darnell, crosses her arms. You sent me a violation for leaving my garbage can out for an extra hour. Meanwhile, the baker's truck hasn't moved in 6 months, and I don't see any fines for them. One of the other homeowners, an older white woman, frowns. Meredith, is this true? Meredith is unraveling now. Her confident mask is cracking. I send complaints as they come in, she stammers. I don't control who's breaking the rules. I just enforce them. I nod.
Right.
And that's why I checked the HOA complaint logs. I flip to another page. Funny thing, I found 6 complaints filed against white homeowners for serious violations. But you never acted on them, did you? Her mouth opens, closes. She's cornered. The room turns against her in real time. Richard exhales, rubbing his temples. This is serious. We'll need to review all of this. Meredith panics. Her eyes dart around the room, desperate for backup. She finds none, but she makes one last, desperate move. She straightens, clutches the edge of the table, and narrows her eyes at me. This is a personal attack. You're just trying to cause trouble. Frankly, it's... She doesn't get to finish, because the door slams open, and in walks my precinct captain. Captain Reed is a tall, sharp-eyed black woman who commands respect without ever raising her voice. And right now, she looks thoroughly unimpressed. Sorry to interrupt, she says, her voice smooth but firm. But I've been following along with this situation. Officer Williams, do you mind if I share something? I smile. Not at all. Meredith grips the table. I don't understand. Why would the police? Captain Reed holds up a flash drive. Because we got an interesting 911 call the other night. A 911 call. My stomach tightens. Meredith's face drains of color. I'd like to play it, Reed says, plugging the flash drive into the room speakers. And then we all hear it. A woman's voice. Meredith's voice. Yes, I'd like to report a suspicious person in our neighborhood. A young black male, wearing a hoodie, loitering outside a home. I don't know if he lives here, but it just doesn't seem right. The room is dead silent. Then another voice, the 911 dispatcher. Ma'am, you're reporting a resident's family member at their own home. This is not an emergency. Meredith makes a choking noise. This is taken out of context. I tilt my head. You called the cops on my nephew, a 17-year-old who's never been in trouble a day in his life. You saw a black boy in a hoodie and assumed he was a threat. Her hands are shaking now. That's not what happened. I was just being cautious. No, Captain Reed cuts in. You were being racist. The words hang in the air, heavy and final. There's no walking this back. Meredith's world is collapsing. The board members look disgusted. Richard leans forward, voice grave. Given the overwhelming evidence of racial discrimination, I think we need to discuss Meredith's removal as HOA president. Lisa snorts. Removal? Honey, she needs to be reported. This is blatant discrimination. The murmurs grow into full-blown agreement. And just like that, the tables have turned. Meredith shakes her head, chest rising and falling rapidly. You can't do this. I built this community. You're all making a mistake. Richard sighs. The only mistake was letting you run it for this long. Meredith looks to me, eyes burning with resentment. She knows. She lost. It happens fast. One moment, Meredith is gripping the table, breathless, scrambling for a lifeline. The next, she's being escorted out of the HOA meeting, her face ghost white as Captain Reed speaks quietly into her radio. I'd advise you to come with us, Reed says, her voice cool, controlled. We have reason to believe this isn't your first discriminatory complaint. And based on your call history, you may be facing charges for filing false police reports. Meredith sputters, her perfectly curated image shattering before our eyes. This is insane. You can't. This is harassment. I run this community. Richard, the HOA board member, exhales sharply. Not anymore, you don't. Meredith freezes. You're being removed as HOA president, effective immediately, he continues. And considering the legal implications of all this, I'd suggest finding a lawyer. The weight of those words hits her like a truck. She whips her head toward the board, toward the neighbors who once nodded along to her every word. But now? They're looking at her like she's toxic. A liability. Even the ones who stayed silent before aren't on her side anymore. Because Meredith Harper just went from powerful to poisonous. Lisa folds her arms, shaking her head. You played yourself, sweetheart. And just like that, Meredith is done. The fallout spreads like wildfire. The HOA sends out a formal statement the next day, publicly condemning Meredith's actions. They promise a full review of enforcement policies, and several residents come forward with their own stories of unfair treatment. News travels fast. By the end of the week, Meredith's name is everywhere. A local journalist picks up the story. The headline? Racist HOA president removed after targeting black homeowner. Police investigating false 911 calls. Her real estate firm quietly drops her. Her once pristine reputation in the neighborhood? Destroyed. And me? I finally breathe. For the first time since moving in, I walk out onto my driveway without feeling like I'm being watched. One evening, Darnell and Lisa come over with a bottle of wine. We sit on the porch, watching our kids play in the yard, free, unbothered. Lisa raises her glass. To justice. Tasha clinks her glass against hers. And to finally enjoying our damn house. Darnell smirks. Man, I still can't believe you recorded her like that. Cold-blooded. I shrug. She gave me no choice. Lisa chuckles. She thought she could run this place forever. Like she was untouchable. I exhale, watching the sky turn gold with the setting sun. People like her always think that. Tasha laces her fingers through mine. But they forget, there's always a reckoning. A week later, I see Meredith one last time. She's leaving her house, boxes stacked in the back of a moving truck. She's been voted out of the HOA, lost her job, and now she's moving. I stand on my porch, watching. She sees me and freezes. For a moment, something flickers across her face. Hate. Resentment. Defeat. But underneath it all, fear. Because now, she's the outsider. I don't say a word. I just watch as she gets into her car, grips the wheel, and drives away. For good. That night, I sit with Tasha on our porch, sipping my drink, breathing in the night air. For the first time, this house, our home, feels different. Lighter. Safer. Ours. And as the crickets hum and the warm breeze brushes against my skin, I close my eyes and smile. Because we didn't just win. We took back what was ours.